Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about humane leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work-life challenges and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we've got you covered. I'm Chris Olerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, and with me is Roberto Torres, a startup engineering leader. We'll dive into real-world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we'll discuss how a humane leader sincerely apologizes when they make a mistake. Morning, Roberto.
Morning, Trace. How are you?
I'm doing good, but I bet you don't know anything about this topic because you never make a mistake, right?
Man, I do a lot of mistakes, as you.
Yeah, I do too, and I actually, on my YouTube channel, I talk about my mistakes. I think it is a very good learning tool to
Yeah.
make mistakes. But I have experience where leaders refuse to acknowledge them, and I'll tell you that can be a huge destroyer of confidence in your leadership. Where the people working for that leader see this is obviously not working, or this was clearly a bad decision. Whatever the mistake is, and they just gloss over it, or they block it from their minds, and they refuse to talk about it, and that really demotivates a team pretty quickly. It's much better to just be honest, be sincere. So how do you sincerely admit a mistake and apologize for it?
Well, actually, I have done many failures in my lifetime as a leader. And when I fail, first of all, I feel kind of bad, you know. I feel like I didn't have the proper decisions to be done. I didn't foresee something. But what I understand is that whenever I made a decision, even if it's good or bad, it was the correct decision because with all the data, all the information that I had at the time, I made that decision and it was good. But when I fail and I feel this way, what I usually do is I talk with the team. I talk with my manager and I say, I failed. I didn't foresee this, and that. I made the decision based on all these factors, and this won't happen again. Why? Because I understand, I learned from this, and yeah, it might be that I wrote something to learn up from this and to gain this knowledge for the future. I usually do this, and before asking you what do you do, is people who doesn't acknowledge failures is the one who usually blames others because of their failure, and that's not a humane leader as we are.
I agree. I agree. You have to take ownership of that decision, and you can't say, "Well, you guys gave me bad information." That's that is garbage. That's making excuses. So an apology, how a humane leader makes an apology is taking ownership that the decision was theirs, the mistake is theirs. It's not blaming others. It's not blaming, I didn't have enough information. It doesn't matter. That's not what an apology is about. I didn't mean to hurt you. That's not what an apology is about. An apology is, look, I'm really sorry. This is how it came out. I don't want to do it again. And as you mentioned, you're going to learn from it. I think a sincere apology from a humane leader really gets to the core of, I admit that I made the mistake. It is me. I own the burden of that. And here's what I'm going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because that's really what your team cares about, right? You're not pointing a finger at them. They care that you're going to make a better decision because ultimately the leader's decisions reflects on all the team members. So don't blame it on them, but in the reality of it is the whole team does suffer from a leader's mistakes. So it's very important that you come out as that humane leader, acknowledge it's your decision, and What are you going to do to keep it from happening again?
Bless you. Yeah, indeed. And the thing is also that the apology has to be timely. You know, that we don't have to wait until the wave has crushed everybody. As soon as we have the information that we have failed, is much better to acknowledge that waiting, that oh, I won't say an apology because nobody will notice. Someone will notice, and when they notice, it will be as much as bad as the time that has passed. I think it's really important for us to apologize, but also we have to understand that what were the points of knowledge that we could gather from this experience. What did we do? What we didn't do? Who was in this decision? Was our decision ourselves? Were a number of people? We had to evaluate this because we're going to fail in the future. That is something that is going to happen. And acknowledging that will make the next failure more easy to be done. I have a philosophy that I talk with engineers. It is fail often, fail smart. I don't care. But it's not that I don't care. I won't foster that you fail, but what I will foster is that you understand why you failed and what not to do. I remember well, and I thought, and I think that I spoke of this in a previous episode. I was at a board meeting, and suddenly one of my engineers threw me a slack and said, Roberto, I wiped out the staging database. And I said, okay, don't worry. We have backup, so we're going to put that database because it wasn't a production database. It was just a testing database. So when I went with this guy after ending the board meeting, he was pale. He thought that I was going to fire him. And I said, no, okay. First of all, what you did, could you tell me? And he said the steps that he took, and I spotted which step wiped out the database, and we discussed, and he understood. And what I did, it took me like an hour to have this backup rolled back and put on in place. So I think it's really important for not only for us, for the team as well, that when they fail, we're not going to nag these people. We're not going to be pressure them because of their fail. It's important for them to understand. No?
Yeah. And having that sincere one-to-one conversation helps you admit it then publicly. So one of the things that you mentioned, in this particular case, it was an engineer who made the mistake. But let's suppose that you as the team leader approved this deletion and it was wrong. He may have done it, but you approved it. Therefore, it is your mistake. So it would really be critical that you have that one-to-one time with him. Say, we're going to figure it out. We're going to back it out. But when you meet with the whole team, your sincere apology is, I made a mistake. Not that your engineer did what you told him to and deleted the database, right? Hey, that guy, he did that and he should have known better that I was stupid, right? Instead, you own that decision of what the team member does. And that's where the team has to hear that you're sincere. You spoke with the engineer first. You apologized to him. Look, Steve, I shouldn't have had you do that to that database without double checking certain commands or making sure that the backups were extra secure, or you took a snapshot right before you did the commands to minimize the amount of data we might lose, et cetera, whatever. But you have this very sincere conversation with an individual, and then you can have a public apology to the team. Like, look, I made a mistake. It was in the heat of the moment. For these kinds of critical decisions, going forward, I'm going to make sure we touch base with two people just to double check what we're doing because we're moving into the next critical phase of, we're going to add our next 100,000 users on this. So, we're going to do some things to catch my mistakes because I made a mistake. It's that kind of sincere leadership where you own it and you have an individual who you impacted the most, you apologize to them first, and then publicly to the team. Just admit it. Made a
Yeah,
mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I learned from it. Here's what I'm going to do is the way to go.
and I'm wondering, since you were in a huge company for many years, I'm wondering how is a company such as big as Honeywell was, how did they accept failure? Because I think that in big companies, accepting failure it to be seen as as you're being weak. Um, did that happen to you on Honeywell, on these big companies?
We would literally have leadership training from HR that would tell us, to, be able to control the level of the mistake, right? So don't make it too expensive, but we won't punish mistakes. The reality was when it came time for performance reviews and everything, mistakes were punished pretty severely. I wouldn't say you necessarily got immediately fired, depending on the gravity of the mistake. Some people made mistakes and absolutely were fired within weeks. But sometimes it took longer because they would kind of let it play out so it didn't seem like they were getting fired for that mistake. So it can be very company culture. And lots of times there are the public rules that HR can show that, look, we do these things. And then there are the operational rules that aren't written down anywhere with the reality of what happens. And that's the challenge for the humane leader is to walk a very fine line between, look, HR's rules are we admit our mistakes and everything's great and we don't, get people in trouble for that. But the operational reality is sometimes different. So I think, a humane leader in an apology by being timely, you mentioned before, make it very timely, is that means, part of managing the mistake is being timely because it reduces the impact of said mistake. If you wait another 2 weeks to finally apologize, that smaller mistake may have ballooned into a much bigger mistake, right? And then the apology, no matter how sincere it is, and no matter how much your company says they don't punish mistakes, if it turned out to be a very expensive mistake, you are going to get punished and you may get fired. That is a reality. But hopefully, by you showing a culture of apologizing, admitting, and mistakes to your team, they'll also surface their mistakes to you more quickly. So, therefore, the odds of actually a big catastrophic mistake that would escalate to the point of you getting fired is much less likely, right? Because we're trying to foster a culture of our teams do as I do, right? I'm going to show you through example of my humane leadership. I'm going to admit my mistakes. I'm going to apologize sincerely and quickly. I'm going to explain how maybe I came to that conclusion that was an error, but more importantly, how I won't do it again. And here's what we're going to do to go forward so that our team is successful. That's the most critical thing, because if you don't apologize and you cover up your mistakes, your team will begin to cover up their mistakes because they're going to be concerned that there might be repercussions or bad things might happen if they admit mistakes, which increases the odds of a big mistake happening, which then everybody gets punished. And we certainly
Yeah,
don't want that as humane leaders.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What you're saying, I understand now. Okay, and does a humane leader thrives with our team in this kind of environment where punishment are being harsh on evaluations, excuse me, on age performance evaluations? Is it possible or is it not? I could tell you about startups, but what about big companies?
It's very difficult. It becomes to some degree you can have it work within smaller groups, but ultimately the culture of the company is driven from the top. I do believe that, especially in big companies. And so, well, you can be a humane leader within the constraints of the leadership above you, I guess is how I would answer. And the less humane your more senior leadership is, the harder it is for you to be a humane leader. So it does take a bit of self-confidence to be significantly more humane than your boss above you, because it may be shown as weakness, right? That you aren't holding people accountable. And there's a big difference between apologizing for a mistake and holding people accountable or not holding people accountable. So if you're honest in your performance reviews and you have a person who was supposed to deliver 1, 2, and 3, but they only delivered 1 and 2, you as a humane leader can have a discussion with them about that performance and say you only got 2/3 done, and they can apologize for not getting number 3 done, and maybe there's legitimate reasons, and that's okay. But if they hide it because you have not created an environment where apologies are okay and apologies are timely, they're going to hide that failure of part number 3 that they were supposed to finish, and then everybody's going to look bad. So, you can be a humane leader. It can work in performance reviews, but it has to be just part of your everyday work. If you make a mistake, admit it timely, put corrections in place, and move on. And that will instill in your team to do the same, which ultimately, most of the time, gains productivity across the whole team because you don't hide mistakes. Mistakes are things that slow down productivity. Mistakes are things that make products not work the way they're supposed to for unknown reasons. Why? Because this other person in the team doesn't want to admit it because they've seen punishment. So you need to really try and foster that to the best of your ability, even if the leadership above you maybe says that they're humane leaders and maybe says that they will apologize for their mistakes, but somehow they never make any mistakes. Well, then you need to be culturally aware of that and realize there may be some limits to your humane leadership, unfortunately.
Understood. Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me tell you about the same scenario, but in a startup. At a startup, what we're trying to achieve is to gain as much as possible users to use our product and service. So if we fail, and what happens with the team and myself as a humane leader, if that fail impacts the growth, the user growth, you must always provide not only the problem or the failure, excuse me, and admit it, but also bring the solution that is going to impact directly and that immediately at that time. With that in mind, people at a startup will see that you have resilience about everything, about these kind of problems, you and your team, and you will thrive. That is the main thing. If you don't provide a solution, because you might say, okay, I failed, it won't happen again. No. Okay, great that you admit it, but you have to be resilient about this and provide a solution. If that happens, that team is going to grow. And what I mean is going to grow in confidence, is going to grow in resilience as well, frustration. So many soft skills that they're going to grow, but that team is going to grow as well because the leaders, usually the founders, will see you as someone who understands failure, who takes advantage of failure in order to boost business towards its goals. So that is the main thing about startups, which are usually a small amount of people within a team.
And way less politics. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that, from my observations myself and from observations of other friends who work at other similar large companies, let's say, 20,000 employees and greater, the politics and the kind of ruthlessness, let's call it, ruthless capitalism versus humane capitalism, are more prevalent the bigger the company, and if it's publicly traded, it can be very, very ruthless. So, I think we as humane leaders, we need to recognize the environment that we're operating in. What are the kinds of politics? How does it work? And how to apologize in a way that doesn't hurt our career, because if we're not there, we can't be humane leaders, right? To do that timely apology, but do it in the way that fits within the culture of the environment you're working in. And in really, really large companies, usually that can be done if you're apologizing quickly enough. In other words, the problem doesn't grow to a magnitude where it becomes a career-ending mistake.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, indeed. I think all these insights from both of us in this variety of spectrum of companies going to help anybody who's listening to this. Well, okay, we have reached our time. Chris, I think with this, we just end this episode.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, Roberto, and we'll talk to you next week.
You too, man. Thank you.